When Elvis Presley stopped singing in the middle of his concert, 20,000 people gasped. He was staring at someone in the back row. His hands were shaking. Tears filled his eyes. "Ma'am," Elvis said into the microphone, his voice breaking. "Would you please come up here?" Everyone turned to look. Who was this mystery woman? Why did the king of rock and roll look like he was about to cry? The woman wore a simple blue dress and a hat that hid her face. She shook her head no. She didn't want to come up. But Elvis wouldn't give up. "Please," he begged. "I need you to come up here." Security guards helped the woman through the crowd. Everyone whispered and pointed. Was she famous? Was she his secret girlfriend? Nobody knew. As she climbed the stairs to the stage, Elvis could barely stand still. This moment had taken 32 years to happen. And it all started when he was just a 10-year-old boy with nothing but a dream. The spotlight burned hot against Elvis Presley's face as he stood center stage at the International Hotel in Las Vegas. 20,000 people packed the venue on this August evening in 1977, their eyes fixed on the king of rock and roll. Sweat dripped down his temples as he swayed to the rhythm of his band playing behind him. Elvis wore his white jumpsuit with golden eagles spreading their wings across the fabric. Diamonds sparkled on his belt and cape. He looked every bit the superstar the world expected him to be. But something felt different tonight. Something heavy pressed against his chest that had nothing to do with the thick Nevada heat. He had been singing for nearly an hour. The crowd cheered after every song, jumping to their feet, screaming his name. Elvis smiled and waved, but his mind kept drifting somewhere else. Somewhere far away, but his mind kept drifting somewhere else. Somewhere far away from the glittering lights and thunderous applause. "Thank you," Elvis said into the microphone, his voice deep and smooth. "Thank you all so much. Y'all are too kind." The band started playing the opening notes to his next song. Elvis closed his eyes and began to sing a soft melody about love and devotion. His voice filled every corner of the massive room. People swayed in their seats, holding hands with the person next to them. But halfway through the song, Elvis stopped singing. The music continued for a few more seconds before the confused band members let their instruments fall silent. The audience murmured with concern. Had something gone wrong? Was Elvis feeling sick? Everyone knew he had been struggling with his health lately. Elvis stood frozen in place, staring out into the crowd. He lifted one hand to shield his eyes from the bright spotlight. His jaw had gone slack, and his other hand trembled at his side. "Elvis," his guitar player whispered from behind him. "You okay, man?" Elvis didn't answer. He took 2 steps forward until he reached the very edge of the stage. His eyes locked onto something in the back row of the venue. Or someone. "Ma'am," Elvis said into the microphone, his voice barely above a whisper. The sound system carried his words to every seat. "Ma'am, would you please come up here?" 20,000 heads turned at once, everyone craning their necks to see who Elvis was talking to. Security guards spun around, searching the crowd. Even the band members stood on their toes, trying to figure out what was happening. In the very last row, sitting in a simple wooden chair near the exit, was a woman. She wore a plain blue dress that looked homemade, without any fancy decorations or jewelry. A wide-brimmed hat sat on her head, casting a dark shadow across her face so no one could see her clearly. Her hands gripped a small purse in her lap. The woman shook her head slowly. No, she didn't want to come up. She seemed to shrink in her seat, as if trying to disappear. But Elvis didn't look away. If anything, his gaze grew more intense. Tears began to form in his eyes, glistening under the stage lights. "Please," Elvis said again, his voice cracking with emotion. He extended his hand toward her even though she sat hundreds of feet away. I need you to come up here. Please." The crowd buzzed with confusion and excitement. Who was this mystery woman? Why did she make Elvis Presley, the most famous entertainer in the world, look like he was about to cry? Why was he begging her to join him on stage? Two security guards made their way to the back row. They spoke gently to the woman, gesturing toward the stage. She continued shaking her head, clearly uncomfortable with all the attention, but the guards were patient and kind, offering to help her walk through the crowd. Finally, slowly, the woman stood up. She was older than most people had expected, moving carefully as if her bones ached. One security guard took her elbow to steady her. The other cleared a path through the audience. Every eye in the building watched as the mystery woman made her way down the long aisle toward the stage. Whispers rippled through the crowd like waves. Who is she? Why does Elvis look so emotional? Is she famous? I've never seen her before. The woman kept her hat pulled low as she walked, her face still hidden in shadow. The security guards helped her climb the stairs on the side of the stage, one careful step at a time. The climb seemed to take forever. Elvis stood at the top of the stairs waiting. His whole body shook now. Tears rolled freely down his cheeks, leaving wet streaks through his stage makeup. His band members had never seen him like this, so vulnerable, so raw. Finally, the woman reached the top step. Elvis took her hand, gently in both of his. She was so close now, just a few feet separated them from the audience. Ladies and gentlemen, Elvis whispered into the microphone, his voice thick with emotion. He could barely get the words out. This woman right here." He paused, completely overcome. The woman stood beside him, still facing away from the crowd, her hat brim casting shadows. Elvis took a shaky breath. His next words would change everything. "This woman?" He tried again. Slowly, with trembling fingers, the mystery woman reached up and began to lift her hat. But before the hat could rise high enough to reveal her face, before the crowd could see who stood beside their beloved king, we must go back. We must travel 32 years into the past, to a time before Elvis Presley was famous, before anyone knew his name, before he was anything more than a poor boy with a dream. The year was 1945. World War II had just ended, and soldiers were coming home to their families. But not everyone had someone to welcome back. Not everyone's story had a happy ending. In the small town of Tupelo, Mississippi, a 10-year-old boy named Elvis lived with his parents in a tiny two-room house. The house was so small that you could stand in the middle and touch both walls if you stretched out your arms. Paint peeled from the wooden boards outside. The roof leaked when it rained. But it was home, and the Presley family was grateful to have it. Elvis's father, Vernon, worked whatever jobs he could find. Some days he loaded trucks at the warehouse. Other days he painted houses or fixed fences for neighbors. The pay was never much, barely enough to keep food on the table. Elvis's mother, Gladys, took in laundry from wealthier families in town. She scrubbed clothes by hand until her fingers turned red and raw. Money was always tight. Some nights, Elvis went to bed with his stomach growling because there wasn't enough supper to go around. He wore the same worn-out clothes to school every day, pants that were too short and shirts with patches on the elbows. Other kids sometimes made fun of him, calling him poor white trash. But Elvis didn't complain. He knew his parents worked hard and did their best. What Elvis loved most in the world was music. Whenever he heard a song on the radio or someone singing at church, he felt something magical stir inside his chest. Music made him forget about being hungry. It made him forget about his too small house and his patched-up clothes. When there was music, nothing else mattered. On Sundays, the Presley family went to the Assembly of God church on the edge of town. Elvis loved church because of the singing. Everyone sang together with such joy and passion that it felt like the walls might burst open. Elvis sang too, his young voice rising with all the others, and for those precious moments he felt rich beyond measure. But church music only happened once a week. Elvis wanted music every day. One hot afternoon in June, Elvis was walking home from the store where his mother had sent him to buy flour. He carried the small paper bag carefully, knowing they couldn't afford to waste a single spoonful. The sun beat down on the dusty road, making waves of heat shimmer in the air. That's when Elvis heard it. A voice. Someone was singing. Elvis stopped walking and tilted his head, listening hard. The voice came from somewhere nearby, floating on the summer breeze like a gift. It was the most beautiful sound he had ever heard, rich and deep and full of emotion that made his throat feel tight. He had to find out who was singing. Elvis left the road and followed the voice through a cluster of oak trees. He walked 3 streets over into a part of town he didn't usually visit. This was where the black families lived, separated from the white families by invisible lines that everyone in Mississippi understood and obeyed. The singing grew louder. Elvis peered around the corner of a small house and saw her. A woman sat on her front porch in a wooden rocking chair. She wore a faded yellow dress and had a basket of mending in her lap. Her skin was dark brown, and her hair was pulled back in a neat bun. She couldn't have been more than 30 years old, though life had already carved small lines around her eyes and mouth. She was singing while she sewed, her needle moving in rhythm with her melody. The song was about rivers and freedom and going home to a better place. Her voice rose and fell like waves, each note perfectly placed. Elvis stood completely still, afraid that if he moved or made a sound, she would stop singing. He had never heard anything so beautiful in his entire life. But the woman must have sensed someone watching, because she suddenly looked up. Her eyes met Elvis's, and she stopped singing mid-word. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Elvis clutched his bag of flour against his chest, his heart pounding. He knew he shouldn't be here. In 1945 Mississippi, white children didn't wander into black neighborhoods. White children definitely didn't stand and stare at black adults. There were rules about these things, rules that could get people hurt. Elvis expected the woman to yell at him to go away. Or maybe she would look scared, worried that a white boy's presence might bring trouble to her door. But she did neither of those things. Instead, she smiled. It was a warm smile, gentle and kind. She set down her sewing basket and tilted her head, studying the skinny white boy with the flower. "You like music, child?" she asked. Her voice when she spoke was as lovely as when she sang. Elvis nodded eagerly, still not sure if he should run or stay. "What's your name?" "Elvis," he said quietly. "Elvis Presley, ma'am." "Elvis," she repeated, as if tasting the name. "That's a strong name. I'm Marianne Fletcher. You can call me Miss Marianne." She gestured to the porch steps. "You want to sit for a spell? I don't get many visitors who appreciate good music." Elvis glanced back toward the road, thinking about his mother waiting for the flower. But the pull of that beautiful voice was too strong. He climbed the 3 steps and sat down carefully at the edge of the porch, leaving plenty of space between himself and Miss Marianne's rocking chair. "You got a good ear for music," Miss Marianne said. "I saw how you were listening. Really listening. Not just hearing. There's a difference, you know." "Yes, ma'am," Elvis said. "I love music more than anything." "Do you sing?" "At church, ma'am. Every Sunday. But I wish I could sing like you do. You make it sound like the music is coming from somewhere deep inside, not just from your mouth." Miss Marianne's smile grew wider. "That's exactly right, Elvis Presley. Music isn't just sound. Music is your heart talking when words aren't enough. Your soul speaking when your voice can't find the right thing to say." She picked up her sewing again and began humming another tune. This one was slower, sadder, about loss and longing. Elvis listened with every fiber of his being. "You want to learn?" Miss Marianne asked suddenly. Elvis's eyes went wide. Learn? You mean you'd teach me? Why not? God gave me this gift and it seems wasteful not to share it. Besides, I can tell you've got something special in you. I can hear it in how you were breathing while I sang, matching the rhythm without even knowing it. Elvis felt like he might burst with joy. But then reality crashed down on him like cold water. I can't pay you, ma'am. My family doesn't have any money. Miss Marianne waved her hand dismissively. Did I ask for money? Music isn't something you buy and sell like flour or sugar. Music is something you give and receive. You give me someone to teach, someone who truly cares. That's payment enough. And so on that hot June afternoon in 1945, a friendship began that would change everything. For the next 18 months, Elvis's life split into two worlds. In one world, he was the poor boy who went to school, did his chores, and tried to make his struggling parents proud. In the other world, he was a student of music, learning secrets that made his heart soar. Twice a week, on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, Elvis would finish his chores as quickly as possible. He would tell his mother he was going to play with friends. Then he would sneak across town to Miss Marianne's small porch, clutching whatever small gift he could bring. A handful of pecans from a tree near his house, wildflowers picked from the roadside, or sometimes just his eager smile. Miss Marianne always welcomed him the same way. "There's my music boy," she would say, patting the porch step beside her rocking chair. "Ready to learn?" And Elvis would learn. She taught him gospel songs passed down through generations of her family. She taught him blues techniques that made notes bend and slide in ways that spoke of pain and joy, all mixed together. She taught him how to feel the rhythm in his bones before it ever left his mouth. She taught him that silence was just as important as sound, that the space between notes could say as much as the notes themselves. Don't just copy what you hear. Miss Marianne would tell him, take the song and make it yours. Pour yourself into it. When you sing about heartbreak, remember every time your heart hurt. When you sing about joy, remember every moment that made you smile. That's what makes music real. Elvis soaked up every word like dry earth, soaking up rain. He practiced in secret, humming melodies while he walked to school, tapping rhythms on his desk when the teacher wasn't looking, singing softly to himself before he fell asleep at night. Miss Marianne also told him stories. She had been married once, she explained, to a man named Thomas who worked at the mill. He was kind and strong and made her laugh. But Thomas had gone off to fight in World War II, and he never came home. A letter arrived instead, expressing regret and condolences, and thanking him for his service. After Thomas died, music was the only thing that kept me alive, Miss Marianne said one autumn afternoon. When I sang, I could feel him near me. I could remember all the good times. Music heals wounds that nothing else can touch. Elvis understood. When he sang, he felt like he could be anything, do anything. Poverty and hunger couldn't touch him when there was music in his soul. But their friendship had to remain secret. In 1945 Mississippi, the world wasn't ready to accept a white boy and a black woman sharing something as intimate as music lessons. There were rules, spoken and unspoken, lines that couldn't be crossed, boundaries that were enforced with violence and fear. "You can't tell anyone about our lessons," Miss Marianne warned him the first day. "Not your parents, not your friends. If word gets out, there'll be trouble for both of us. But especially for me. You understand?" Elvis understood. Even at 10 years old, he knew enough about the world to know that it wasn't fair, that people judged you by the color of your skin before they ever listened to what was in your heart. But he also knew that Miss Marianne was giving him something precious, and he would protect that gift with everything he had. The months passed. Summer turned to fall, fall to winter. Elvis turned 11 years old. His voice was changing, growing deeper, gaining strength. Miss Marianne said he was improving faster than anyone she had ever taught. "You've got a gift, Elvis Presley," she told him one December afternoon. "A real gift. You could be something special someday if you work hard and stay true to the music." Elvis blushed with pride. "You really think so?" "I know so. Promise me something, child. Promise me that if you ever get the chance to share your music with the world, you'll never forget where it came from. Never forget the people who gave you these songs, the black folks who poured their hearts into gospel and blues, who used music to survive the hardest times. Promise me you'll honor that." "I promise," Elvis said solemnly. "And promise me one more thing. Promise me you'll use your voice to bring people together, not push them apart. Music doesn't care what color you are. Music belongs to everyone. Can you promise me that too?" "Yes, ma'am. I promise." Miss Marianne smiled and patted his cheek. "Good boy. Now let's practice that new hymn I taught you last week." But on a cold Thursday evening in December 1946, everything changed. Elvis arrived at Miss Marianne's house at his usual time, just before sunset. But something was wrong. The front door stood open, and he could see boxes stacked inside. Miss Marianne's rocking chair, her favorite spot, sat empty on the porch. Elvis's stomach twisted with worry. He climbed the steps slowly. Miss Marianne, she appeared in the doorway carrying an armful of folded clothes. When she saw Elvis, her face crumpled with sadness. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying. "Oh, Elvis," she said, her voice breaking. "I was hoping I'd get to say goodbye." "Goodbye?" Elvis felt like the ground had dropped out from under his feet. "What do you mean? Where are you going?" Miss Marianne set down the clothes and sat heavily on the porch step, gesturing for Elvis to sit beside her. She took a deep breath, as if gathering courage. "I have to leave Tupelo, sweetheart. Tonight. I'm taking the last bus to Memphis." "But why? What happened?" Miss Marianne hesitated, then decided he deserved the truth. "Someone saw us together last week. A man walking past the house saw you sitting here while I was teaching you that new song. He recognized you, knew you were a white child." Word spread fast. Elvis felt sick. "What did people say?" "Things I won't repeat to a child. But my landlord came by yesterday and told me I needed to leave town before something bad happens. He said people were angry, that they might come here to teach me a lesson about my place." Tears sprang to Elvis's eyes. "This is my fault. I should have been more careful. I should have." "No!" Miss Marianne grabbed his shoulders firmly, looking straight into his eyes. "Don't you dare think that way, Elvis Presley. Don't you dare carry that guilt. You brought joy into my life this past year. You reminded me why I love music, why it's worth sharing. Teaching you has been one of the greatest blessings of my life. But you have to leave because of me. I have to leave because the world is broken, not because of anything you did. We shared something beautiful, and there's no shame in that. Never let anyone tell you different." Elvis was crying fully now, tears streaming down his face. "I don't want you to go. You're the best teacher I ever had. You're my friend." Miss Marianne pulled him into a hug, holding him tight. "You're my friend too, sweet boy. And I'm so proud of you. You're going to do amazing things with your music. I feel it in my bones." She pulled back and wiped his tears with her thumb. "Wait here just a moment." Miss Marianne went inside and returned carrying something small wrapped in brown paper. She pressed it into Elvis's hands. "Open it after I'm gone," she said. "It's for you." Elvis clutched the package to his chest. "I won't forget you, Miss Marianne. I promise I won't forget anything you taught me." "I know you won't. And remember those promises you made me? About honoring where the music comes from. About using your voice to bring people together. Can you remember those promises? Yes, ma'am, I'll keep them. I swear I will. That's my good boy. Miss Marianne stood up, straightening her dress. The bus leaves in an hour. I need to finish packing. Elvis stood too, but he couldn't make his feet move toward the steps. He couldn't make himself leave. If he left, this would be real. This would be goodbye. Will I ever see you again? He asked in a small voice. Miss Marianne's eyes filled with fresh tears. I don't know, honey. I truly don't know. But I'll never forget you. And somewhere out there, I'll be listening for your voice. When you become the singer I know you can be, I'll hear you and think, that's my Elvis. That's my music boy. She kissed the top of his head gently. Now go on home before your mama worries. And Elvis, thank you for these 18 months. Thank you for caring about an old widow's songs. You're not old, Elvis protested through his tears. Miss Marianne laughed softly. Bless your heart. Go on now, go. Elvis descended the porch steps backward, unable to take his eyes off her. He wanted to memorize everything, the way she stood, the sound of her voice, the gentle smile on her sad face. He wanted to hold this moment forever. At the bottom of the steps, he finally turned and ran. He ran through the gathering darkness, tears blurring his vision, clutching the brown paper package against his heart. He ran until his lungs burned and his legs ached. He ran until he couldn't run anymore. When he finally stopped, gasping for breath on an empty stretch of road, Elvis carefully unwrapped the package. Inside was a small leather notebook, worn soft with age. He opened it with trembling fingers. The pages were filled with Miss Marianne's handwriting, song lyrics, musical notes, and pieces of wisdom about music and life. She had written down everything she knew, everything she had taught him, and more. Years of knowledge, preserved in careful script. On the first page she had written a message. For Elvis Presley, my brightest student and dear friend. Music is a gift, freely given and freely shared. Carry these songs forward, make them your own, and never forget that music belongs to all of us, together. With love and pride, Marianne Fletcher. December. Elvis pressed the notebook to his chest and sobbed in the darkness. That night, Marianne Fletcher boarded the last bus to Memphis, leaving behind the only home she had known, and an 11-year-old boy stood alone on a dark road, holding a notebook filled with dreams, promises, and the foundation of what would someday become the voice that changed music forever. Neither of them knew if they would ever see each other again. Neither of them knew how long the separation would last. But both of them knew that what they had shared, the music, the friendship, the promises, would last forever. The years passed like water flowing down the Mississippi River, sometimes fast, sometimes slow, but always moving forward. In 1948, when Elvis was 13 years old, the Presley family packed everything they owned into their old truck and left Tupelo behind. Vernon had found work in Memphis, Tennessee. They needed a fresh start, a chance at a better life. As the truck rumbled down the highway toward their new home, Elvis pressed his face against the window and watched the countryside roll by. His heart beat faster with every mile. Memphis. Miss Marianne had moved to Memphis 2 years ago. Maybe, just maybe, he would find her again. But Memphis was a big city with thousands of people. Finding one person in all that noise and confusions seemed impossible. Still, Elvis carried hope in his chest along with Miss Marianne's leather notebook, which he kept hidden under his mattress like treasure. The Presleys moved into a housing project called Lauderdale Courts. It was nicer than their Tupelo house. They had 2 bedrooms now, indoor plumbing, and windows that didn't leak when it rained. Other families lived in identical apartments all around them. The walls were thin, and Elvis could hear neighbors singing, arguing, laughing, and living their lives. Elvis attended Humes High School. He was shy and quiet, still wearing clothes that looked too poor compared to other kids. But he was growing taller, and his hair was thick and dark. Some girls started noticing him, though he was too nervous to talk to them much. What Elvis really cared about was music. He listened to everything he could find on the radio: gospel, country, blues, rhythm and blues. He would lie on his bed at night with Miss Marianne's notebook open beside him, studying her notes while music poured from his little radio. He practiced the techniques she had taught him, blending different styles together in ways that felt natural to him. On Sunday mornings, Elvis went to church and sang with the congregation. On Saturday nights, he walked down Beale Street, the famous stretch of Memphis where black musicians played blues in clubs and on street corners. Elvis would stand outside those clubs, too young to go in, but close enough to hear the music pouring out. He absorbed everything: the way the singers bent their notes, the rhythm that made people want to move, the raw emotion that came from deep suffering and deep joy. He searched for Miss Marianne everywhere. He asked people on Beale Street if they knew a woman named Marianne Fletcher. He checked church directories. He walked through different neighborhoods, hoping to hear that familiar voice singing on a porch somewhere. But Memphis had over 300,000 people, and most of them didn't know each other. Finding one woman seemed impossible. Still, Elvis never forgot his promises. Every time he sang, he thought about Miss Marianne's words: "Music belongs to everyone. Use your voice to bring people together." In 1953, when Elvis was 18 years old, he did something bold. He walked into a small recording studio called Sun Records and paid $4 to record a song as a birthday present for his mother. The owner, Sam Phillips, heard something special in the young man's voice. Something different, something new. "You sing like a white boy who learned from black folks," Sam said, studying Elvis with sharp eyes. "Where'd you pick that up?" Elvis thought about Miss Marianne but didn't tell her story. That secret was too precious to share with strangers. "I just listen to everything, sir. I love all kinds of music." Sam Phillips nodded slowly. "Come back sometime, I might have some work for you." Elvis returned to Sun Records several times over the next year. Sam gave him songs to try, experimenting with different styles. Nothing quite clicked until one hot July night in 1954. Elvis started playing around an old blues song, adding his own twist to it. The other musicians joined in. The sound that came out was something nobody had heard before. Blues and country and gospel all mixed together, with a rhythm that made people want to jump out of their seats. "That's it!" Sam Phillips shouted. "That's the sound I've been looking for." They recorded "That's All Right," and suddenly, everything changed. The song played on Memphis radio stations. People called in asking who this Elvis Presley was. Some white listeners thought he was black because of how he sang. Some black listeners thought he was white, trying to sound black. Nobody could quite figure out what to make of him. But they all agreed on one thing: they couldn't stop listening. Elvis started performing at small venues around Memphis. Word spread. Crowds grew. Girls screamed and fainted when he moved his hips on stage. Parents frowned and called his music dangerous. Radio DJs argued about whether his style was appropriate, but everyone was talking about Elvis Presley. By 1956, Elvis had signed with a bigger record label. His song "Heartbreak Hotel" reached #1 on the charts. He appeared on national television, and the whole country watched. He made movies in Hollywood. He bought his mother a pink Cadillac and a big house called Graceland. Elvis Presley became the most famous young man in America. Through it all, through every performance and every recording session, Elvis carried Miss Marianne's lessons with him. The way he sang, blending black gospel with white country, mixing blues with pop, came directly from what she had taught him on that small porch in Tupelo. Music critics would later call him revolutionary, a pioneer who broke down barriers. But Elvis knew the truth. He was just keeping a promise to a woman who had believed in a poor, skinny boy when nobody else did. Late at night, when the crowds went home and the cameras turned off, Elvis would take out Miss Marianne's worn leather notebook. He would run his fingers over her handwriting and wonder where she was. Did she know about his success? Had she heard his songs on the radio? Was she proud of him, or did she think he had forgotten his promises? The guilt gnawed at him. His music was becoming popular with white audiences, but some people said he was stealing from black musicians without giving them credit. Others said he was making money off a sound that black artists had created but couldn't get played on white radio stations. "I'm trying to honor the music," Elvis told his mother one night, frustrated and confused. "I'm trying to do what's right, but I don't know if I'm succeeding." Gladys patted her son's hand. "You've got a good heart, Elvis. You always have. Just stay true to yourself." But Elvis wasn't sure anymore what being true to himself meant. Fame was complicated. Success came with questions he didn't know how to answer. In 1957, Elvis bought Graceland, a beautiful mansion in Memphis with tall white columns and acres of land. He moved his parents in and made sure they never had to worry about money again. Vernon didn't have to work odd jobs. Gladys didn't have to scrub other people's laundry until her hands bled. "We made it, baby," Gladys said, walking through the grand rooms with tears in her eyes. "We really made it." But Elvis felt hollow sometimes, even in his beautiful mansion. He had everything money could buy, but he didn't have the one thing he wanted most. He didn't know if he was keeping his promises to Miss Marianne. He tried to honor her lessons in other ways. When he performed, he always gave credit to the black gospel singers and blues musicians who had influenced him. He spoke respectfully about the music's roots. He insisted on recording gospel albums even though his manager said they wouldn't sell as well as rock and roll. "Gospel music matters," Elvis said firmly. "It's part of who I am. I'm recording gospel, and that's final." The gospel albums did sell. People heard the emotion in Elvis's voice when he sang those sacred songs. They heard something genuine and real, something that came from deep inside his soul. But still, Elvis searched for Miss Marianne. Every time he performed in Memphis, he hoped she might be in the audience. He asked people if they knew her. He even hired someone to search records and directories, but the search turned up nothing. It was as if Marianne Fletcher had disappeared completely. Maybe she had moved away from Memphis. Maybe she had married and changed her name. Maybe she had passed away. The not knowing was its own kind of torture. Years continued to pass. The 1950s became the 1960s. Elvis got drafted into the army and served his time with honor. He made more movies, though many of them weren't very good. He met a young woman named Priscilla and eventually married her. They had a daughter, Lisa Marie. And Elvis loved being a father. But his mother, Gladys, died in 1958, and Elvis was never quite the same after that. The pain of losing her left a hole in his heart that never fully healed. The 1960s became the 1970s. Elvis's marriage fell apart, and he divorced Priscilla. His movie career ended. He started performing in Las Vegas, wearing elaborate jumpsuits covered in jewels and doing the same show night after night. Some people said Elvis had lost his fire, that he was just going through the motions. They said he wasn't the revolutionary young singer anymore, just a middle-aged entertainer playing his greatest hits for tourists. But they were wrong. Inside, Elvis still carried the same passion for music that he had felt as a 10-year-old boy sitting on Miss Marianne's porch. The fire never went out, it just got buried under layers of fame, pressure, and pain. Elvis struggled with prescription medications that doctors gave him for various ailments. He struggled with loneliness despite being surrounded by people all the time. He struggled with the weight of being Elvis Presley, of carrying everyone's expectations on his shoulders. Late at night in his bedroom at Graceland, Elvis would take out Miss Marianne's notebook. The leather was even more worn now, the pages yellowed with age, but every word was still legible. Every lesson still clear. "I'm trying, Miss Marianne," he would whisper to the empty room. "I'm still trying to keep my promises. But I don't know if I'm doing it right. I wish I could find you. I wish I could ask if you're proud of me or disappointed. I wish I knew if I've honored the gift you gave me." The notebook never answered, of course. But Elvis kept it close anyway, the most precious possession he owned. More valuable than all his gold records, all his movie contracts, all his expensive cars and jewels. By 1977, Elvis was 42 years old. His health was declining. He looked older than his years, swollen from medications and poor diet. His energy was fading. But his voice, that remarkable instrument that Miss Marianne had helped shape 32 years ago, was still powerful when he chose to use it. And then, in July 1977, something happened that would change everything one final time. A letter arrived at Graceland, addressed simply to Elvis Presley, Memphis, Tennessee. It had been forwarded through several addresses and was crumpled from its journey. Elvis opened it with shaking hands. As he read the words written inside, tears began streaming down his face. His heart pounded so hard he thought it might burst. The letter was from a Reverend James Fletcher in Las Vegas. He was writing about his Aunt Marianne Fletcher. After 32 years of searching, of wondering, of hoping, Elvis had finally found her, or rather, she had found him. But the letter contained both joy and heartbreak. Joy because Miss Marianne was alive. Heartbreak because she was dying. Elvis read the letter 3 times, his hands trembling harder with each reading. Then he picked up the phone and started making calls. He had promises to keep, and he was finally going to keep them. Elvis sat in his bedroom at Graceland, holding the letter with both hands as if it might disappear if he let go. His vision blurred with tears as he read the words again for the 4th time. "Dear Mr. Presley, my name is Reverend James Fletcher. I am writing to you about my Aunt Marianne Fletcher. She is currently in hospice care here in Las Vegas. The doctors say she doesn't have much time left, perhaps a few weeks at most. My aunt has talked about you for 30 years. She told me about a little boy in Tupelo that she taught music to back in 1945 and 1946. She said you had a gift, that you were going to be something special. When you became famous, she would sit by her radio and listen to your songs with the biggest smile on her face. She never tried to contact you. She said you had important things to do and didn't need an old woman bothering you. She made me promise not to write to you either. But I'm breaking that promise now because she's dying, and I think you should know." Last week, Aunt Marianne whispered something that broke my heart. She said her only regret was never knowing if you kept the promises you made to her as a child. She wanted to tell you that it's okay if you didn't. She said life gets complicated, and people forget, and she understands. "But I've watched you on television, Mr. Presley. I've heard you talk about gospel music and where your style comes from. I don't think you forgot at all. If by some miracle this letter reaches you, we are at Sunrise Hospice on Charleston Boulevard in Las Vegas. I thought you should know that someone believed in you before the whole world did. Respectfully, Reverend James Fletcher." Elvis's hands shook as he set the letter down on his nightstand. After all these years, after all the searching, she was alive. She remembered him. She had been listening all along, but she was dying. Elvis looked at the calendar on his wall. Today was July 27. He had concerts scheduled for the next few weeks, including a big show in Las Vegas on August 8th. His manager, Colonel Parker, had the whole tour planned out. Tickets were sold. Contracts were signed. None of that mattered anymore. Elvis picked up the phone beside his bed and dialed. A woman's voice answered after 3 rings. Sunrise Hospice. How may I help you? Yes, ma'am, Elvis said, his voice hoarse with emotion. I'm looking for a patient named Marianne Fletcher. Are you family? Elvis paused. Was he family? Not by blood, but in every way that mattered. Yes. I'm an old friend, a very old friend. A nephew, Reverend Fletcher, wrote to me. One moment, please. Elvis waited, his heart hammering. After what felt like forever, a man's voice came on the line. This is James Fletcher. Reverend Fletcher, this is Elvis Presley. I got your letter. There was stunned silence on the other end. Then, Mr. Presley, really? I didn't think the letter would actually reach you. It reached me. Tell me about Miss Marianne. Please. How is she? Reverend Fletcher's voice grew sad. Not good, sir. She's very weak. She sleeps most of the day. When she's awake, she's often confused. But sometimes she has moments of clarity where she's completely herself again. Can I see her? I need to see her. I've been searching for her for 32 years. You have? The Reverend sounded amazed. She never knew. She always thought, well, she thought you'd forgotten about her. Never, Elvis said fiercely, not for one single day. I looked everywhere. I asked everyone. I just couldn't find her. She changed her last name when she remarried in 1950. Reverend Fletcher explained. She was Marianne Thibodeau for 20 years, until her second husband passed. Then she went back to Fletcher. That's probably why you couldn't locate her. Elvis closed his eyes. So simple. A name change. That's all it was.
I'm coming to Las Vegas, Elvis said. I have a concert there on August 16. I'll see her then. But that's almost a month away. Will she make it that long?
I don't know, the Reverend said honestly. The doctors are surprised she's held on this long. She's a fighter. She always was, Elvis said softly. Tell her I'm coming. Tell her I never forgot. Tell her I kept my promises. Can you tell her that for me? I will, Mr. Presley. I promise I will. Elvis hung up and sat in silence for a long time. His mind raced with memories. Miss Marianne's porch, a patient voice teaching him to sing. The way she made him feel like music was magic. The promises he had made as an 11-year-old boy. Promise me you'll never forget where the music comes from. Promise me you'll use your voice to bring people together. Had he kept those promises? Elvis wasn't sure anymore. The question had haunted him for years. Yes, he had spoken publicly about his influences. He had recorded gospel albums and given credit to black musicians who had shaped his sound. He had tried to be respectful, but he had also become rich and famous, singing music that black artists had created but couldn't get played on white radio stations. He had opened doors for himself that remained closed to the people who had invented the sound. Some people called him a thief. Some people said he had exploited black music for personal gain. Elvis had never intended that. He had only wanted to share the music he loved. But intentions didn't change results. The guilt was a weight he carried every day, pressing down on his chest until he could barely breathe. And now Miss Marianne was dying, possibly thinking he had forgotten her, possibly disappointed in what he had become. Elvis couldn't let her die without knowing the truth. He couldn't let her leave this world thinking her student had failed. Over the next 3 weeks, Elvis called Reverend Fletcher every few days for updates. Miss Marianne was holding on, but barely. Some days she was lucid and remembered everything. Other days she thought she was still young, still living in Tupelo, still married to her first husband, Thomas. Have you told her I'm coming? Elvis asked during one call. I've tried, the Reverend said. On her good days she smiles when I mention your name, but I'm not sure if she fully understands. The medications make her foggy. Elvis's heart ached. He wanted to fly to Las Vegas immediately, but Colonel Parker kept him locked into his schedule. Concerts in different cities, television appearances, photo shoots. The machine of fame rolled on whether Elvis wanted it to or not. I have obligations, Elvis explained to Charlie Hodge, one of his closest friends. But all I want to do is see Miss Marianne. Then, go see her, Charlie said simply. Cancel the shows. Tell the Colonel to reschedule. But it wasn't that simple. Thousands of tickets had been sold. Hotels were booked. Promoters had contracts. Breaking those commitments would cost millions of dollars and damage his reputation further than it already was. The newspapers were already full of stories about Elvis being past his prime, overweight, unreliable. So Elvis waited, counting down the days until August 16. He made plans in secret, telling no one except his most trusted friends. After the Las Vegas concert, he would go to Miss Marianne. He would sit with her. He would tell her everything. He would finally keep his promises completely. To prepare himself, Elvis spent his evenings reading Miss Marianne's old notebook. He studied her notes about music and life. He remembered every lesson she had taught him. On one page she had written, "The greatest gift you can give someone is to truly see them, to recognize their worth when the world overlooks them." Elvis thought about all the people the world had overlooked. The poor folks like his family had been. The black musicians who created incredible art but couldn't get played on mainstream radio. The forgotten people working hard just to survive. Had he used his voice to lift them up? Or had he just climbed higher while they stayed below? The question tormented him. On August 10, 6 days before the Las Vegas concert, Elvis called Reverend Fletcher again. "How is she today?" "Actually, she's having a good day," the Reverend said, surprised. "She's been awake most of the morning. She's weak, but her mind is clear. She's been humming old gospel songs." Elvis's throat tightened. Can I talk to her? Is that possible? Let me ask." Elvis heard muffled conversation in the background, then shuffling sounds. Finally, a voice came on the line, thin and weak, but unmistakable. "Elvis, is that really you, baby?" Elvis burst into tears. After 32 years, he was hearing her voice again. "Yes, ma'am, it's me. It's your music boy."
Miss Marianne made a sound between a laugh and a sob.
"Oh, my sweet child. I can't believe it's really you. I heard your songs on the radio. I watched you on television. You became everything I knew you would be." "I tried to find you," Elvis said through his tears. "I looked everywhere. I never stopped looking." "I know, baby. My nephew told me. All this time I thought you'd forgotten about me. But you remembered. You remembered. Every single day," Elvis promised. "Miss Marianne, I'm coming to see you. I have a concert in Las Vegas on August 16. After that, I'm coming straight to you. We'll sit together like we used to. We'll talk about music. I have so much to tell you." There was a pause. Then Miss Marianne said softly, "I don't know if I'll still be here on August 16, sweetheart. I'm very tired." "You hang on," Elvis said urgently. "Please, Miss Marianne, just a few more days. Can you do that for me? I need to see you. I need to tell you something important." "What is it, baby?" Elvis took a deep breath. "I need to know if I kept my promises to you. I need to know if I did right by the music you gave me. Need to know if you're proud of me or disappointed. I've carried that question for 32 years and I can't carry it anymore." Miss Marianne was quiet for a long moment. When she finally spoke, Her voice was gentle and firm. Elvis Presley, you listen to me. I've been proud of you every single day since 1946. Every time I heard your voice on the radio, every time I saw you on television, my heart swelled up so big I thought it might burst. You took the gift I gave you and shared it with the whole world. That's all I ever wanted. But some people say I stole. Hush now. You didn't steal nothing. Music can't be stolen. Music is meant to be shared, passed from person to person like a flame lighting candles in the dark. You kept the flame burning. That's what matters, Elvis sobbed openly. I tried so hard to honor what you taught me. I know you did, baby, and you succeeded. But if you need to hear me say it in person, then I'll hold on. I'll wait for you. We'll have our moment together. I promise. Thank you, Elvis whispered. Thank you for everything. For believing in me. For teaching me. For waiting. I love you, my music boy. I'll see you soon. Elvis hung up the phone and collapsed onto his bed, crying harder than he had cried since his mother died. But these weren't just tears of sadness. They were tears of relief, of gratitude, of love. 6 more days. He just had to make it 6 more days. Then he would see Miss Marianne. Then he would finally close the circle that had begun 32 years ago on a small porch in Mississippi. Then at last he could rest. The days crawled by like hours, each one feeling longer than the last. Elvis could barely focus on anything except the approaching date. August 16, 1977. The day he would finally reunite with Miss Marianne after 32 years of separation. He called the hospice every morning to check on her condition. Some days she was awake and asking about him. Other days she slept through the entire day, too weak to open her eyes. The nurses told Reverend Fletcher that her body was shutting down slowly, but her spirit seemed to be fighting to stay alive just a little longer. She's waiting for you, the Reverend told Elvis during one call. I can see it. She's holding on through sheer willpower. Elvis's own health wasn't good either. He felt exhausted all the time, and his body ached in ways that frightened him. His doctor kept adjusting his medications, trying to help with the pain and insomnia that plagued him. But Elvis pushed through it. He had to make it to August. Nothing else mattered. On August 12, just 4 days before the concert, something happened that changed everything. Elvis was in his study at Graceland, going over final details for the Las Vegas show. The afternoon sun streamed through the windows, making dust particles dance in the golden light. He was tired, so very tired, but he forced himself to stay focused. His assistant knocked on the door. Elvis? There's another letter here for you. It's marked urgent and it's from Las Vegas. Elvis's heart jumped. He took the envelope with shaking hands. It was from Reverend Fletcher again. But this time the envelope was thicker, heavier. Inside were 2 items, a short note from the Reverend and another letter, this one written in handwriting that Elvis would recognize anywhere. Miss Marianne's handwriting, though shakier and less steady than it had been. Elvis read the Reverend's note first. Mr. Presley, my aunt had a moment of remarkable clarity yesterday. She insisted on writing you a letter, though it exhausted her terribly. She made me promise to mail it immediately. I'm also including something she wanted you to have now, just in case she doesn't make it until the 6th. She's growing weaker each day, but her determination is extraordinary. She talks about you constantly. Please hurry. James Fletcher. With trembling fingers, Elvis unfolded Miss Marianne's letter. A handwriting wandered across the page, some words darker than others, where she had pressed hard with the pen. He could imagine her in the hospice bed, struggling to write, refusing to give up until she had said what needed to be said. My dearest Elvis, I am writing this on what might be one of my last clear days. My body is ready to rest, but my heart needed to tell you some things first. I have spent 32 years watching your journey from a distance. I saw you transform from that skinny, hungry boy on my porch into the man who changed music forever. And oh, what a journey it has been. I need you to know something important, something I should have told you back in 1946 but didn't, because you were just a child. The gift wasn't me giving something to you. The gift was you giving something to me. After my Thomas died in the war, I thought my life was over. I had no children, no real repose. Music was the only thing keeping me alive, but I was singing into emptiness. Then you appeared, this curious little boy with stars in his eyes and hunger for something beautiful. You reminded me why music matters. You gave me a reason to keep going. You asked on the phone if you kept your promises to me. Elvis, you kept them in ways I never imagined possible. You took music that lived in small churches and back porches and shared it with the entire world. You made people listen who would never have listened otherwise. You built bridges where there had only been walls. I know people have criticized you. I know some folks say you took from black musicians without giving back, but I was there at the beginning. I know your heart. You never took anything, you received gifts that were freely given, and you honored them by sharing them with everyone. The world is complicated, baby. Sometimes doing the right thing still looks wrong to some people, but you and I, we know the truth. Music doesn't belong to any one group of people. Music belongs to everyone who opens their heart to it. I'm so proud of you. Not because you became famous or wealthy. I'm proud because you stayed true to the music. Even when it would have been easier to forget where you came from. You remembered, even when people told you to play it safe. You kept taking risks. Even when your heart was breaking, you kept singing. There's something else I need to tell you, and this is the hardest part. I'm not going to make it to August 16, sweetheart. I can feel my body giving out. The doctors give me medication for the pain, but it makes me sleep most of the time. I might not be conscious when you arrive. But here's what I want you to know. Seeing you one more time isn't as important as making sure you understand how much you meant to me. You already gave me the greatest gift when you were 10 years old. You reminded me that life is worth living, that beauty exists even in hard times, that love and music can survive anything. If I'm asleep when you come, or if I've already passed on, please don't carry guilt or sadness. Instead, do something for me. Do something that will mean more than any goodbye. There's a young nurse here named Patricia who takes care of me. She has a beautiful voice, but no money for music lessons. Her family is poor, just like yours was, just like mine was. She sings softly while she works, not knowing anyone can hear her, but I hear her. And I hear the same gift in her voice that I heard in yours 32 years ago. Find someone like Patricia. Find someone who has the gift but not the opportunity. Teach them. Help them. Pass on what I gave to you. That's how you truly keep a promise, not by returning to the past, but by carrying the gift forward into the future. I will love you forever, my music boy. We'll meet again someday, on the other side, where there's nothing but music and joy and no more pain. Until then, sing for me. Sing for all of us who believed in you. Sing with your whole heart. Your music will echo long after both of us are gone. And that, my sweet Elvis, is the greatest promise anyone could ever keep. With all my love, Marianne Fletcher. P.S. I'm enclosing something that belongs to you now. Keep it safe. Elvis's tears had soaked the letter, making some of the ink run. He could barely see through his blurred vision. His chest felt like it might crack open from the weight of love and loss pressing against his ribs. He looked into the envelope and pulled out the second item. It was a small, faded photograph, creased and worn from being handled many times over the years. The photo showed a much younger Marianne standing on her porch in Tupelo, smiling at the camera. Someone had written on the back in pencil, "Marianne Fletcher, Summer." Elvis pressed the photograph to his heart and wept. She wasn't going to make it until the 16th. He had been counting on seeing her, talking to her, closing the circle in person. But life didn't always give you the endings you wanted. Sometimes you had to accept what you were given and find peace anyway. But Miss Marianne had given him something better than a reunion. She had given him release from the guilt he'd carried for decades. She had told him clearly, directly, with no room for doubt, that he had kept his promises, that he had done right by her and the music, that she was proud of him, and she had given him one more mission: find someone else to help. Pass the gift forward. Elvis sat in his study until the sun set and the room grew dark around him. He didn't turn on the lights. He just sat there, holding the photograph and the letter, letting 32 years of wondering and guilt finally drain away. Around 9 o'clock, his friend Charlie knocked softly and entered. He found Elvis sitting in the darkness, tears still wet on his face. "You okay, man?" Elvis shook his head. "She's dying, Charlie. Miss Marianne, the woman who taught me everything about music. She's dying and I'm not going to make it in time to say goodbye." Charlie sat down beside him. "I'm sorry, Elvis. I really am. But she wrote me a letter," Elvis said, his voice hoarse. She told me I did good, that I kept my promises, that she's proud of me." "Of course she's proud. Anyone would be proud." Elvis looked at his friend in the darkness. "I need to do something, Charlie. Miss Marianne asked me to find someone to help. Someone who has musical talent, but no opportunities. Will you help? Whatever you need, man. You know I will." Elvis stood up, suddenly energized despite his exhaustion. "The nurse. Miss Marianne mentioned a nurse at the hospice named Patricia. I need to meet her. I need to know if she's the one." "The one for what?" "The one I'm supposed to help next. Miss Marianne started something 32 years ago when she taught a poor white boy from Tupelo. Now I need to continue it. I need to pass the gift forward, like she said." Charlie nodded slowly. "Okay. How do you want to do this?" Elvis thought for a moment, then made a decision. "The concert on August 16. I'm still going to do it. I'm going to sing my heart out, every gospel song I know. And then, after the show, I'm going to the hospice. Even if Miss Marianne isn't conscious, even if she's already gone, I'm going there. I'm going to meet Patricia and anyone else who needs help. I'm going to make sure Miss Marianne's legacy continues." "That's a good plan," Charlie said. Elvis picked up the photograph of young Marianne and looked at it one more time. "She saved my life, you know. When I was 10 and had nothing, she gave me hope. She gave me music. She gave me a reason to believe I could be something more than just another poor kid who nobody noticed. And you became exactly what she knew you could be." "I hope so," Elvis whispered. "I really hope so." That night, Elvis barely slept. He lay in his bed at Graceland, staring at the ceiling, thinking about promises and music and the woman who had changed his life 32 years ago. His body ached with exhaustion, but his mind wouldn't rest. He thought about his mother, Gladys, who had loved him unconditionally. He thought about his daughter Lisa Marie, who was growing up so fast. He thought about all the people who had believed in him over the years, who had given him chances when he didn't deserve them. But mostly, he thought about Miss Marianne and the little boy he used to be, sitting on a porch in Mississippi, learning that music could heal wounds that nothing else could touch. 4 more days until Las Vegas. 4 more days until he could honor her memory properly. 4 more days until he could start passing the gift forward, just like she asked. Elvis picked up Miss Marianne's old leather notebook from his nightstand and opened it to a random page. Her handwriting from 1946 stared back at him, young and strong and full of hope. Music is your heart, talking when words aren't enough. Elvis closed his eyes and whispered into the darkness, "I hear you, Miss Marianne. I've always heard you, and I always will." Outside his window, the stars shone bright over Memphis. Somewhere in Las Vegas, an old woman lay in a hospice bed, breathing slowly, holding on just a little longer, and between them, stretched across hundreds of miles and 3 decades of memories, was a connection that death itself couldn't break. The promise would be kept. One way or another, the circle would close. Just 4 more days. The morning of August 13 arrived with a phone call that made Elvis's blood run cold. He had just finished breakfast, though he had barely touched his food, when his assistant rushed into the dining room, phone in hand, face pale with worry. "Elvis, it's Reverend Fletcher. He says it's urgent." Elvis grabbed the phone so fast he nearly dropped it. "Reverend, what's happened?" "Mr. Presley." The Reverend's voice was thick with emotion. "My aunt. She had a bad turn last night. The doctors don't think she'll last another day, maybe 2 at most. I'm so sorry." Elvis felt the room spin around him. 2 days. That would be August 15 at the latest. His concert wasn't until the 16th. He would be too late. "I'm coming now," Elvis said, his voice shaking. "Today, I'll catch the first flight to Las Vegas." "Mr. Presley, are you sure? Don't you have obligations?" "Nothing is more important than this," Elvis interrupted. "Nothing. I'll be there by this afternoon." He hung up and immediately started barking orders to his staff. "Get the jet ready. Call the pilot. We're leaving for Las Vegas in 1 hour. And somebody call Colonel Parker and tell him I'll be there for the concert on the 16th, but I'm going early." His staff scrambled to make arrangements while Elvis ran upstairs to pack. His hands shook as he threw clothes into a suitcase. He grabbed Miss Marianne's leather notebook and the photograph she had sent him, tucking them carefully into his jacket pocket, right over his heart. Charlie appeared in the doorway. "I'm coming with you." "You don't have to." "I'm coming," Charlie said firmly. "You shouldn't be alone for this." Elvis nodded gratefully. He didn't trust himself to speak without breaking down completely. 2 hours later, Elvis's private jet was racing across the sky toward Nevada. Elvis sat by the window, staring down at the clouds below, his mind a jumble of memories and regrets. He was finally going to see Miss Marianne again, but would she even know he was there? Would she be conscious enough to recognize him? He pulled out her letter and read it again for the 100th time. "Seeing you one more time isn't as important as making sure you understand how much you meant to me." But it was important to Elvis. He needed to see her. He needed to hold her hand. He needed to thank her properly for everything she had given him. The flight felt like it lasted forever, but finally, the plane touched down in Las Vegas. Elvis didn't even wait for his luggage. He just grabbed his jacket and ran through the airport, Charlie struggling to keep up. Outside, a car was waiting to take them to the hospice. "Drive fast," Elvis told the driver. "Please." The driver glanced in the rearview mirror and recognized his famous passenger. His eyes went wide. "Yes, sir, Mr. Presley." "Right away, sir." They sped through the streets of Las Vegas, past the famous casinos and bright lights of the Strip. But Elvis didn't see any of it. His eyes were fixed straight ahead, his jaw clenched tight, his hands gripping his knees. "Please let me make it in time," he whispered. "Please, God, just let me make it in time." Sunrise Hospice was a small single-story building on the outskirts of the city, surrounded by desert landscape and palm trees. It looked peaceful and quiet, a place where people went to spend their final days with dignity. Elvis burst through the front doors, startling the receptionist at the desk. "I'm here to see Marianne Fletcher," he said breathlessly. "I'm Elvis. I'm a friend. A nephew is expecting me." The receptionist's mouth fell open in shock. Elvis Presley was standing in her lobby, sweating and disheveled, clearly in distress. Yes, of course, room 12. Down the hall to the left. Reverend Fletcher is with her now. Elvis ran down the hallway, his footsteps echoing off the linoleum floors. Room numbers blurred past him, 8, 9, 10, 11, and then he was standing in front of room 12. The door was partially open. Elvis could hear voices inside speaking softly. He knocked gently and pushed the door open wider. The room was small and painted a soft blue color. Sunlight streamed through gauzy curtains, casting everything in a gentle glow. Medical equipment hummed quietly in the corner, and there, in a hospital bed surrounded by pillows and blankets, lay Miss Marianne. Elvis's breath caught in his throat. She looked so different from the vibrant woman he remembered. She was thin now, her skin almost translucent, her hair completely white and spread across the pillow like a halo. Her eyes were closed, and her breathing was shallow and labored. An oxygen tube ran beneath her nose. A man in his 40s stood beside the bed, holding her hand. He looked up when Elvis entered, and his eyes filled with tears. "Mr. Presley," he whispered, "you came. You actually came." Elvis could barely speak. Is she conscious?" Reverend Fletcher shook his head sadly. "Not since early this morning. The morphine keeps her comfortable, but it also keeps her asleep. I don't think she can hear us anymore." Elvis walked slowly to the bedside, as if approaching something sacred. He looked down at the woman who had changed his life 32 years ago. Even in her diminished state, he could see traces of the person she had been, the gentle curve of her smile, the strong hands that had once demonstrated chord positions, the peaceful expression of someone who had lived with purpose. "Miss Marianne," Elvis whispered, taking her other hand gently in both of his. "It's me, it's Elvis, your music boy. I'm here. I finally found you." Her hand was cool and fragile, like holding a small bird. Elvis brought it to his lips and kissed it softly. "I'm so sorry it took me so long," he continued, tears streaming down his face. "I looked everywhere for you. Every city I performed in, every street I walked down. I hoped I'd see you again. And now I'm here. But you can't." His voice broke completely. He laid his head down on the edge of her bed, still holding her hand, and sobbed. Charlie and Reverend Fletcher stood quietly by the door, giving Elvis his moment of grief. After several minutes, Elvis lifted his head and wiped his eyes. He looked at the Reverend. "Tell me about her. Tell me about the last 30 years. I need to know how she lived." Reverend Fletcher pulled up a chair, and Elvis sat down beside the bed, never letting go of Miss Marianne's hand. Over the next hour, the Reverend told him everything. After leaving Tupelo in 1946, Miss Marianne had indeed come to Memphis. She worked as a seamstress and sang in a church choir. In 1950, she met a kind man named Robert Thibodeau, a postal worker. They married and had 15 happy years together before he died of a heart attack in 19... Miss Marianne never had children of her own, but she became like a mother to her nephew James after his parents died. She moved to Las Vegas in 1970 to be closer to him when he started his ministry there. She worked with the church, James explained, teaching music to kids in the community. She gave free lessons to anyone who wanted to learn, especially children from poor families. She said music saved her life multiple times, and she wanted to pass that gift along. Elvis's throat tightened. Of course she did. Of course Miss Marianne had spent her life giving music to others just like she had given it to him. Did she ever talk about me? Elvis asked quietly. "All the time," James said with a small smile, "especially when your songs came on the radio. She'd stop whatever she was doing and just listen. Sometimes she'd cry, sometimes she'd smile, But she always said the same thing afterward. "That's my boy. That's my music boy." Elvis pressed Miss Marianne's hand against his wet cheek. "I wish I had found her sooner. I wish I could have done more for her. Mr. Presley, you gave her the greatest gift possible. You became exactly what she believed you could be. You made her proud every single day." A nurse entered the room quietly to check Miss Marianne's vital signs. She was young, probably in her mid-20s, with dark skin and gentle eyes. She moved efficiently but kindly, adjusting the IV line and checking the monitors. As she worked, she hummed softly under her breath. It was an old gospel hymn, and her voice was pure and beautiful. Elvis looked up at her. "Are you Patricia?" The nurse looked startled that he knew her name. "Yes, sir. How did—" "Miss Marianne wrote about you in her letter. She said you have a gift." Patricia's eyes filled with tears. "Miss Marianne was always so kind to me. She's been my favorite patient. We'd sing together sometimes when she was having good days. She told me I should take voice lessons, but I can't afford." She stopped, looking embarrassed. "I'm sorry, you don't need to hear about my problems." "Yes, I do," Elvis said firmly. He stood up, still holding Miss Marianne's hand with one of his, and reached into his jacket with the other. He pulled out a business card and handed it to Patricia. "This is my manager's number. Call him after everything is over here. Tell him Elvis sent you. Tell him I'm paying for your music education, lessons, school, whatever you need." Patricia stared at the card, then at Elvis, her mouth opening and closing in shock. "Mr. Presley, I can't, that's too much." "It's not enough," Elvis said. "Miss Marianne asked me to help you. And when Miss Marianne asks me to do something, I do it. Promise me you'll call." Patricia nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I promise. Thank you. Thank you so much." After Patricia left, Elvis sat back down and took Miss Marianne's hand again. He talked to her for hours, even though she couldn't respond. He told her about his life, his successes and failures, his joys and regrets. He told her about Lisa Marie and how he was trying to be a good father. He told her about Graceland and how he wished she could see it. Most importantly, he thanked her. He thanked her for believing in a skinny, poor boy when nobody else did. He thanked her for teaching him that music could heal. He thanked her for making him promise to use his voice to bring people together. "I tried, Miss Marianne," he whispered. "I didn't always succeed, but I tried. And I'm going to keep trying for as long as I can." The sun set outside the window, painting the room in shades of orange and pink. Charlie brought Elvis some coffee and a sandwich, but Elvis barely touched them. He just sat beside Miss Marianne's bed, holding her hand, keeping vigil. Around 9 o'clock that evening, something changed. Miss Marianne's breathing shifted slightly. Her eyelids fluttered but didn't open. Her fingers twitched in Elvis's hand. Reverend Fletcher leaned forward. "Aunt Marianne, can you hear us?" For just a moment, so brief that Elvis almost thought he imagined it, Miss Marianne's lips curved into the smallest smile. Her fingers squeezed Elvis's hand with surprising strength. Then she relaxed again, her breathing evening out. "She knows you're here," the Reverend said, his voice filled with wonder. "Somehow she knows." Elvis brought her hand to his lips again. "I'm here, Miss Marianne. I'm right here. You can rest now. You can rest knowing I kept my promises. You can rest knowing I'll be passing the gift forward, just like you asked. Thank you for everything. Thank you for my whole life." He began to sing softly, his eyes on the sparrow, the gospel song she had taught him when he was 10 years old. His voice, that famous instrument that had thrilled millions, filled the small hospice room with gentle beauty. Charlie joined in quietly. Then Reverend Fletcher. The three men sang together, their voices blending in harmony, giving Miss Marianne a concert that no audience would ever hear. When the song ended, Elvis wiped his eyes and looked down at the woman who had saved him. "I'll sing for you tomorrow night, Miss Marianne. I'll sing at my concert like you're sitting in the front row. And somehow, I know you'll hear me. Wherever you are, you'll hear me." He stayed at the hospice until midnight, then reluctantly let Charlie convince him to go to their hotel to get some rest. He had a concert to prepare for tomorrow, but he promised Reverend Fletcher he'd be back first thing in the morning. "She's peaceful," the Reverend assured him. "She's not in pain. And now she knows you came." That's what mattered most to her. At the hotel, Elvis couldn't sleep. He lay in bed thinking about the concert tomorrow night, August 16, 1977. It would be his last scheduled show before a brief break. He decided to make it special. He would sing more gospel songs than usual. He would pour everything he had into every note. He would make it a tribute to the woman who had taught him that music was more than entertainment. It was love made audible. And if Miss Marianne was still alive tomorrow, if by some miracle she had another moment of clarity, maybe, just maybe, there was something else he could do. Something big. Something that would honor her properly in front of the whole world. An idea began forming in Elvis's mind. It was risky and emotional, and might not even work. But the more he thought about it, the more right it felt. Tomorrow night's concert would be more than just a show. It would be a promise kept. It would be a circle closed. It would be everything he had waited 32 years to do. Elvis finally fell asleep just before dawn, clutching Miss Marianne's photograph against his chest, dreaming of music and mercy and the mysterious ways that love survives across time and distance and even death itself. Tomorrow night, everything would change. Tomorrow night, the mystery woman would take the stage. August 16th, 1977 began with golden sunshine pouring through the hotel windows, but Elvis woke with a heavy feeling in his chest. He immediately called the hospice. "She's still with us," Reverend Fletcher said softly. "Barely, but she's still breathing. It's like she's waiting for something." Elvis knew what she was waiting for. "I'm coming over now, and tonight, I want to bring her to the concert." There was silence on the other end of the line. Then, "Mr. Presley, I don't think that's possible. She can't leave the bed. She needs constant medical care." "Then we'll bring the medical care with us," Elvis said firmly. "I'll arrange for an ambulance. I'll have doctors and nurses standing by. I'll make sure she's comfortable and safe. But if there's any chance at all that she could be there, I need to try. Please." The Reverend was quiet for a long moment. "Let me talk to her, doctors. I'll call you back." Elvis hung up and immediately started making phone calls. He contacted the concert venue and explained that he needed a special section prepared in the back row, away from the crowd, with space for medical equipment. He arranged for a private ambulance. He hired 2 nurses to accompany Miss Marianne. He made sure everything would be perfect. Money didn't matter. Logistics didn't matter. All that mattered was giving Miss Marianne one last gift, the chance to hear him sing in person one more time. 2 hours later, Reverend Fletcher called back. "The doctors say it's crazy. They say moving her could be dangerous. But they also say she probably won't last another day anyway. So if this is what she would have wanted," he paused. "Aunt Marianne always said she wanted to hear you sing one more time. So yes, we'll do it." Elvis felt relief wash over him like cool water. "Thank you. Thank you so much." He spent the rest of the day at the hospice, sitting beside Miss Marianne's bed, talking to her even though she didn't respond. He told her about the plan for tonight. "I'm going to bring you to the show," he said, holding her hand. "You're going to hear me sing. And Miss Marianne, I'm going to do something else too. Something I should have done years ago. I'm going to tell the world about you. about what you gave me, about why you matter." Her hand remained limp in his, but Elvis liked to think he felt the tiniest squeeze, a whisper of acknowledgement. As evening approached, the medical team carefully prepared Miss Marianne for transport. They loaded her onto a stretcher, making sure her oxygen and IV lines were secure. She looked so small and fragile, wrapped in blankets, her white hair spread across the pillow. Elvis rode in the ambulance with her, holding her hand the entire way. The sun was setting over Las Vegas, painting the desert sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple. The famous Strip came into view, all lights and glittering promises. "We're almost there, Miss Marianne," Elvis whispered. "Just hold on a little longer." The International Hotel loomed ahead, massive and bright. Thousands of people were already gathering outside, excited to see Elvis Presley perform. They had no idea that tonight's show would be different from any concert Elvis had ever given. The ambulance drove to a private entrance at the back of the building. Security guards cleared the way as the medical team wheeled Miss Marianne through quiet corridors to a specially prepared area in the very back row of the concert hall. The space had been converted into a small medical station. Monitors and equipment stood ready. A comfortable chair sat beside the stretcher for Reverend Fletcher. Curtains could be drawn for privacy, but they would remain open so Miss Marianne could see the stage if by some miracle she opened her eyes. The nurses transferred her carefully from the ambulance stretcher to the prepared bed. She never woke during all the movement. Her breathing remained shallow and steady, assisted by the oxygen flowing through the tube beneath her nose. Elvis stood beside her, adjusting her blankets, making sure she was positioned just right. "Can she hear anything?" he asked the nurse. "Possibly," the nurse said kindly. "Hearing is often the last sense to go. She might be able to hear sounds even if she can't respond." Elvis nodded. That was enough. That had to be enough. "I need to go get ready now," he told Miss Marianne softly. "But you're here. You made it. And in a little while I'm going to sing for you. Just for you." He kissed her forehead gently, then forced himself to walk away toward the dressing room. Charlie was waiting for him there with his concert outfit, the white jumpsuit with golden eagles that he'd planned to wear tonight. "You sure about this?" Charlie asked as Elvis changed clothes. "About bringing her up on stage? It's going to be intense, man."
"I've never been more sure of anything in my life," Elvis said. He looked at himself in the mirror, 42 years old, puffy from medications, tired beyond measure, but his eyes burned with purpose. "Tonight isn't about me, Charlie. Tonight is about honoring someone who deserves to be honored, someone the world needs to know about." At 8 o'clock, the lights in the concert hall dimmed. 20,000 people erupted in cheers and applause. The band took their positions, and Elvis Presley walked onto the stage to thunderous applause. The spotlight hit him, hot and bright. He couldn't see the audience beyond the first few rows, but he knew Miss Marianne was out there somewhere in the darkness, in the very back row, waiting, listening. Elvis grabbed the microphone and began to sing. He performed several of his famous hits, and the crowd went wild. People screamed and cheered and sang along, but Elvis's mind was elsewhere. He was pacing himself, building towards something bigger. After about 40 minutes, he stopped and signaled the band to pause. The audience quieted, sensing something different in the air. "Ladies and gentlemen," Elvis said, his voice carrying to every corner of the vast hall, "tonight is a special night for me. Tonight I want to sing some gospel music, some of the songs that mean the most to me." The band started playing a gentle melody, and Elvis began to sing an old hymn. His voice soared through the room, rich and powerful and full of emotion. This wasn't entertainment. This was worship. This was gratitude. This was love. He sang 3 gospel songs in a row, pouring his heart into every note. People in the audience began to cry.
moved by the raw feeling in his voice. They had come expecting rock and roll, but they were getting something deeper, something sacred. And then, during the opening notes of another hymn, Elvis stopped singing mid-verse. The music continued for a few seconds before the confused band members let their instruments fall silent. The audience murmured with concern. Elvis stood frozen at center stage, staring out into the darkness beyond the lights. His guitar player whispered from behind him, "Elvis, you okay, man?" Elvis didn't answer. He walked to the edge of the stage and raised one hand to shield his eyes from the spotlight. His gaze was fixed on something in the very back of the venue. In the darkness of the back row, something impossible was happening. Miss Marianne's eyes had opened. The nurses attending her gasped in surprise. One moment she had been unconscious, barely breathing. The next moment, her eyes were wide open, clear and focused, staring toward the distant stage where Elvis stood in his white jumpsuit under the bright lights. "Aunt Marianne." Reverend Fletcher leaned close, hardly daring to believe it. "Can you hear me, Elvis?" she whispered, her voice thin as paper, but unmistakable. "My music boy." Back on stage, Elvis felt something shift in his heart. He couldn't see her clearly from this distance, couldn't know that her eyes had opened, but he felt her presence like a warm hand on his shoulder. After 32 years of separation, after all the searching and longing, she was here. She was listening. This was the moment. This was why they had both held on. Elvis spoke into the microphone, his voice trembling. "Ma'am, would you please come up here?" 20,000 heads turned at once, everyone craning their necks to see who Elvis was talking to. The spotlight operators scrambled to find the mystery woman in the massive crowd. In the back row, Miss Marianne's eyes filled with tears. She tried to shake her head no. She was too weak. She couldn't possibly walk to that stage. It was impossible. But Reverend Fletcher understood. He understood what Elvis was trying to do, what this moment meant. He looked at the nurses. "Can we move her? Is there any—" The nurses exchanged glances. This was medically inadvisable. Moving her could be dangerous, but they also saw the look in the old woman's eyes, a look of desperate longing, of needing to be somewhere one final time. "We'll help," one nurse said quietly. "We'll make it work." Meanwhile, on stage, Elvis was insisting. "Please," he said again, his voice cracking with emotion. "I need you to come up here. Please." Security guards made their way to the back row, guided by the spotlight operators who had finally found Miss Marianne's location. The crowd buzzed with excitement and confusion. Who was this mystery woman? Why did Elvis look like he was about to cry? The medical team carefully, slowly transferred Miss Marianne to a wheelchair. They wrapped her in a soft blue shawl over her hospital gown. Her nephew held her hand as they began the long journey through the crowd toward the stage. Every eye in the building watched as the mystery woman made her way down the aisle. People whispered and pointed. The woman was old and clearly sick. She wore a wide-brimmed hat that the nurses had placed on her head to protect her sensitive eyes from the bright lights. The journey took several minutes. With each row they passed, the crowd grew quieter, sensing they were witnessing something profound, something bigger than a concert. Finally, the wheelchair reached the front of the stage. Security guards helped lift Miss Marianne from the chair, supporting her on both sides. Two nurses stayed close, ready to help if she faltered. Step by step, they climbed the stairs at the side of the stage. Miss Marianne's legs barely supported her weight, but she kept moving forward, determination written on her face. Elvis stood at the top of the stairs, waiting. His whole body shook with emotion. Tears streamed openly down his face, leaving wet tracks through his stage makeup. His band members had never seen him like this, so vulnerable, so raw, so completely stripped of the Elvis Presley persona. Finally, Miss Marianne reached the top step. The nurses helped her stand on her own for just a moment. Elvis took her hand gently in both of his. "Ladies and gentlemen," Elvis whispered into the microphone, his voice thick with tears. This woman right here." He couldn't finish the sentence. He was completely overcome. Miss Marianne stood beside him, swaying slightly, held up by the nurses on either side. She still faced away from the crowd, her hat brim casting shadows across her features. Elvis took a shaky breath and tried again. This woman, the audience sat in absolute silence, barely breathing, waiting. Slowly, with trembling fingers that seemed to take all her remaining strength, Miss Marianne reached up and began to lift her hat from her head. The hat came off slowly, revealing Miss Marianne's face to the crowd for the first time. The spotlight caught her features, the deep brown skin, lined with age, the white hair framing her gentle face, the eyes that shone with tears and love, despite the exhaustion in every part of her body. A collective gasp rippled through the audience. This was an elderly black woman, clearly very ill, wearing a simple hospital gown under a blue shawl. She looked nothing like the glamorous celebrities who usually joined Elvis on stage. She looked ordinary. She looked forgotten. She looked like someone the world had overlooked. But the way Elvis held her hand, the way tears poured down his face as he looked at her, told everyone in that room that this woman was anything but ordinary. Elvis finally found his voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Marianne Fletcher." He paused, letting the name hang in the air. The name meant nothing to anyone in the audience. They waited, confused but captivated. "When I was 10 years old," Elvis continued, his voice shaking, "my family was dirt poor. We lived in a 2-room house in Tupelo, Mississippi. I wore the same clothes to school every day. I went to bed hungry most nights. I had nothing except a dream that maybe, somehow, music could save me." The audience listened in complete silence. Even the people in the back rows leaned forward, straining to hear every word. "One day I heard singing coming from a porch in the part of town where black families lived. I followed that beautiful voice and found Miss Marianne. She was a widow who had lost her husband in the war. She was alone and grieving, but she had music in her soul." Elvis looked down at Miss Marianne, who gazed back at him with such love and pride that it made his heart ache. Miss Marianne did something that could have gotten her in terrible trouble in 1945, Mississippi. She invited a white boy to sit on her porch, and she taught me music. For 18 months, she taught me everything she knew about gospel and blues. She taught me that music doesn't care what color you are. She taught me that music is your heart, talking when words aren't enough. Several people in the audience began crying. They were starting to understand. Then somebody saw us together. Word spread, and Miss Marianne had to leave town in the middle of the night because people threatened her. All because she showed kindness to a poor boy who loved music. Elvis's voice grew stronger, more passionate. "I was 11 years old when she left. She gave me a notebook filled with everything she knew about music. And she made me promise 2 things. First, to never forget where the music comes from the black folks who created gospel and blues out of their pain and their joy. Second, to use my voice to bring people together instead of pushing them apart." He turned to face the audience directly. "Every song I've ever sung, every record I've made, every performance I've given, all of it comes from what this woman taught me. She's the one who showed me how to blend different styles together. She's the one who taught me to sing with my whole heart. She's the reason I became Elvis Presley." The audience erupted in applause, but Elvis raised his hand for quiet. He wasn't finished. "For 32 years, I searched for her. Every city I visited, I asked if anyone knew Marianne Fletcher. I looked and looked but couldn't find her. Until a month ago when her nephew wrote me a letter telling me she was in hospice care right here in Las Vegas. Miss Marianne swayed slightly, and the nurses steadied her. Elvis kept one hand wrapped around hers, anchoring her. I came to see her as fast as I could. And tonight, even though the doctors said it was impossible, even though she's so weak she can barely stand, Miss Marianne insisted on being here. She wanted to hear me sing one more time. Elvis's voice broke completely. He had to pause and wipe his eyes before he could continue. Miss Marianne, I'm so sorry it took me 32 years to find you. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you back in Tupelo. I'm sorry the world made you hide and run away just for showing kindness. But I want you to know, I want everyone to know, that you are the most important teacher I ever had. You saved my life. You gave me hope when I had nothing else. He turned back to the audience, his face fierce with emotion. This woman should be famous. This woman should have her name in history books. She should be recognized and honored for the gift she gave to music. But instead, she had to live in the shadows because the world wasn't ready to accept that a black woman and a white boy could share something beautiful. Many people in the audience were openly weeping now. The story was hitting them hard. The injustice of it, the beauty of it, the love that had survived 3 decades of separation. Tonight, I want to do what I should have done years ago, Elvis said. I want to honor Miss Marianne publicly. I want the world to know who she is and what she means. And I want to keep the promises I made to her 32 years ago. Elvis looked down at Miss Marianne again. Her eyes were wet with tears, but she was smiling. It was the same gentle smile she had given a skinny 10-year-old boy sitting on her porch in 19... Miss Marianne, Elvis said softly, I tried my best. I tried to honor the music. I tried to bring people together. Did I do right by you? Did I keep my promises? For a moment, Miss Marianne just looked at him. Then, with tremendous effort, she lifted one trembling hand and cupped Elvis's face, just as she had done when he was 11 years old and saying goodbye. When she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper, but the microphone caught it and carried it to every corner of the massive hall. Baby, she said, her voice cracking with emotion and exhaustion, you did more than I ever dreamed. You gave the world something beautiful. You made music that crosses every line people try to draw. You kept your promise 1,000 times over. The entire venue erupted. 20,000 people stood at once, applauding and crying. The sound was deafening, a thunderous wave of emotion that seemed to shake the very walls. Elvis and Miss Marianne stood together on that stage, crying and smiling. 2 people separated by race and class and time, but united by music and love that refused to die. The applause continued for several minutes. People cheered and whistled and shouted. They were witnessing something they would tell their grandchildren about, the night Elvis Presley honored the woman who had made him who he was. Finally, Elvis raised his hand again for quiet. The crowd slowly settled down, though many people were still wiping tears from their eyes. There's one more thing, Elvis said. Miss Marianne, would you sing with me? Just one song. The first song you ever taught me. Miss Marianne looked uncertain. I'm so weak, baby. I don't know if my voice... Then I'll be strong for both of us, Elvis said gently. Please, let's sing together one last time. Miss Marianne nodded slowly. The nurses helped position her more securely, making sure she wouldn't fall. Elvis signaled to his band. We're going to sing an old gospel hymn. Some of you might know it. Feel free to join in if you want. The band began playing soft, gentle music. And then Elvis and Miss Marianne began to sing together. Their voices blended perfectly. His strong and rich, hers thin and wavering but still beautiful. They sang about faith and hope and grace. They sang about eyes watching over sparrows and people. They sang about never being alone, no matter how hard life gets. The song was simple but profound, and as they sang, something magical happened. People in the audience began joining in, softly at first, then stronger. The entire venue filled with 20,000 voices singing together, black and white, young and old, rich and poor, all united in one song. It was the most beautiful moment of Elvis's entire career. This was what music was meant to be. This was what Miss Marianne had tried to teach him 32 years ago. Music that healed. Music that united. Music that reminded people of their shared humanity. When the song ended, there wasn't a dry eye in the building. Even Elvis's band members were crying. Security guards wiped tears from their faces. The nurses attending Miss Marianne openly wept. Elvis turned to Miss Marianne and embraced her carefully, holding her fragile body against his. "Thank you," he whispered in her ear. "Thank you for everything. Thank you for seeing me when nobody else did. Thank you for believing in me. Thank you for giving me music." Miss Marianne whispered back, so softly that only Elvis could hear. "I love you, my music boy. I always have. I always will." They stayed like that for a long moment, two souls who had found each other across impossible distances, holding tight to something more precious than fame or fortune. Finally, gently, Elvis released her. The nurses moved in to help support her again. She was completely exhausted, barely able to stand. "Ladies and gentlemen," Elvis said to the audience, "Miss Marianne needs to rest now. But before she goes, I want to tell you one more thing. I'm establishing a music scholarship fund in her name. Full scholarships for young musicians from poor families, regardless of their race or background. Miss Marianne spent her whole life giving music to people who couldn't afford lessons. Now her legacy will continue, helping young people discover their gifts just like she helped me discover mine." The audience erupted in applause again. Miss Marianne's eyes widened with surprise and gratitude. She tried to speak but didn't have the strength. "Your name will live on," Elvis promised her. "Young musicians will learn your story. They'll know who you were and what you gave to the world. You won't be forgotten, Miss Marianne. Never again." The nurses began carefully helping Miss Marianne toward the stairs. The audience stood and applauded as she made the slow journey off the stage. It took several minutes, with frequent stops to let her rest. Elvis watched her go, his hand pressed against his heart. As she reached the bottom step, Miss Marianne turned back one last time. She looked up at Elvis standing alone on the stage, and she smiled. Then the nurses wheeled her away back through the crowd, back toward the medical area where she could rest. Elvis stood alone on the stage, tears still streaming down his face. The audience gradually quieted, waiting to see what would happen next. "I need a minute," Elvis said honestly. That was 32 years of waiting. 32 years of searching. And it was worth every second. He wiped his face with a handkerchief someone handed him. Then he straightened his shoulders and picked up the microphone again. "Let's make some music," he said. For the next hour, Elvis sang with more passion and energy than he had shown in years. He poured everything into every song. All his love for Miss Marianne, all his gratitude for music, all his hope that people could learn to see past their differences and find what connected them. The audience sang along, danced, cheered, and cried. They knew they had witnessed something historic. This wasn't just a concert. This was a moment of truth, of healing, of love made visible. When the show finally ended near midnight, Elvis took his final bow to thunderous applause. But instead of going back to his dressing room immediately, he ran off stage and headed straight for the medical area in the back. He found Miss Marianne lying on the hospital bed, oxygen mask over her face, eyes closed. Reverend Fletcher sat beside her, holding her hand. The nurses monitored her vital signs quietly. "How is she?" Elvis asked breathlessly. "Exhausted but peaceful," one nurse said. "That took every bit of her remaining strength. But look at her face. She's smiling." Elvis moved closer and saw it was true. Even unconscious, Miss Marianne wore the smallest, most peaceful smile. Elvis took her other hand gently. "Thank you for tonight," he whispered. "Thank you for being brave enough to come. Thank you for singing with me. It was the greatest honor of my life." He stayed there for another hour, just sitting beside her, holding her hand, occasionally talking to her even though she didn't respond. Charlie eventually came to find him. "Elvis, we need to get you back to the hotel. You're exhausted, man." Elvis nodded reluctantly. He kissed Miss Marianne's forehead one last time. "I'll come see you tomorrow," he promised. "We'll talk more. We'll make plans for the scholarship fund. There's so much more I want to do." As Elvis stood to leave, Reverend Fletcher touched his arm. "Mr. Presley, thank you. You gave her the greatest gift tonight. You let her see that her life mattered, that her work wasn't in vain. You don't know what that means." "She's the one who gave me the gift," Elvis said. "Everything I am comes from her." Elvis left the venue and went back to his hotel. He fell into bed fully clothed, so exhausted he could barely move. But despite his exhaustion, he felt more at peace than he had in years. The circle was closed. The promise was kept. Miss Marianne knew, truly knew, that her student had succeeded, that her lessons had borne fruit, that her belief in a skinny little boy had been justified. Tomorrow, Elvis thought as he drifted toward sleep, tomorrow he would visit Miss Marianne again. They would talk about the scholarship fund. They would make sure her legacy lived on forever. There was so much still to do. But tonight, they had sung together. Tonight, they had shared their truth with the world. Tonight, love had triumphed over every obstacle that had tried to keep them apart. Elvis fell asleep with a smile on his face, Miss Marianne's photograph clutched against his chest, dreaming of music and promises kept, and the mysterious ways that grace finds us when we need it most. Elvis woke the next morning to sunlight streaming through the hotel curtains and the sound of his phone ringing insistently. He fumbled for it, still groggy with sleep. "Hello? Mr. Presley, this is Nurse Patricia from the hospice." Her voice was gentle but heavy with sadness. "I'm calling about Miss Marianne." Elvis's heart seized in his chest. He sat up abruptly, suddenly wide awake. "What happened? She passed away peacefully about an hour ago, around 7 this morning. Reverend Fletcher is with her now. She went in her sleep, no pain. She was smiling." Elvis couldn't speak. The phone felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds in his hand. After everything, after last night, after finally finding her again. "Mr. Presley? Are you there?" "Yes," Elvis managed to whisper. "I'm here. I thought I'd have more time with her. I thought we could talk more. I had so many plans." "She knew," Patricia said softly. "She knew everything you wanted to say. Last night gave her exactly what she needed. She died knowing she mattered, knowing her life had purpose. That's the greatest gift you could have given her." After Elvis hung up, he sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, staring at nothing. Miss Marianne was gone. The woman who had saved him, who had believed in him when he was just a poor boy with nothing, was gone. But even through his grief, Elvis felt something else, a strange sense of peace. They had said their goodbyes. They had sung together one last time. The promises had been kept. The circle was complete. Charlie knocked softly and entered. "I heard. I'm so sorry, man." Elvis nodded, wiping tears from his eyes. "She waited for me. She held on long enough to hear me sing. That's all she wanted. And I'm grateful, so grateful that I got there in time. What do you want to do now?" Elvis stood up, straightening his shoulders with determination. I want to go to the hospice. I want to be with her family. And then I want to make sure the scholarship fund happens exactly the way I promised. Miss Marianne's work isn't finished just because she's gone. Elvis spent the morning at Sunrise Hospice with Reverend Fletcher, making arrangements and sharing memories. They talked about Miss Marianne's life, the music she loved, the students she had taught over the years, the quiet way she had made the world better without ever seeking recognition. She kept a scrapbook, Reverend Fletcher said, pulling out a worn album. Look, inside were newspaper clippings about Elvis spanning 3 decades. Articles about his first recordings, his movies, his concerts. Someone had carefully cut them out and pasted them in, with dates written in the margins in Miss Marianne's handwriting. She followed your entire career, the Reverend explained. Every achievement, every milestone. She was so... Elvis traced his fingers over the yellowed clippings, overwhelmed by the evidence of her love and faithfulness. I wish I had known. I wish I could have shared it all with her. In a way you did. She felt connected to you through the music. Every time she heard your voice on the radio, she felt like you were right there with her. Before leaving the hospice, Elvis went to Miss Marianne's room one final time. She lay peacefully, looking smaller somehow, as if death had made her lighter. The smile was still on her face. Elvis pulled a chair close and sat down. For a long time, he just looked at her, memorizing her features, saying his private goodbye. I'm going to keep going, he told her softly. I'm going to make sure your scholarship fund helps hundreds of young musicians. I'm going to tell your story every chance I get. And every time I sing, I'll remember that you taught me how. You'll never be forgotten, Miss Marianne. I promise you that. He leaned forward and kissed her forehead one last time. Then he stood, straightened his shoulders, and walked out into the bright Nevada sunshine. Over the next few days, Elvis threw himself into making arrangements. He contacted lawyers about establishing the Marianne Fletcher Music Scholarship Fund. He set aside a substantial amount of his own money to ensure it would continue for generations. He made sure the fund would prioritize students from poor families and underrepresented communities. He also kept his promise to Patricia, the nurse. He paid for her to attend music school and arranged for private voice lessons with the best teachers in Las Vegas. She cried when he handed her the first check. Miss Marianne believed in you, Elvis told her. Now I'm believing in you too. Don't let us down. I won't, Patricia promised through her tears. I'll make you both proud. The funeral was held on August 20th, 1977, at a small church in the black community of Las Vegas. Elvis attended, wearing dark sunglasses and a simple black suit. Word had spread quickly about what had happened at the concert, and the church was packed with people who wanted to pay their respect. Elvis sat in the front row with Reverend Fletcher and Miss Marianne's extended family. During the service, several people shared memories of her kindness, her beautiful singing voice, her generous spirit. Students she had taught over the years stood up and thanked her for changing their lives. When it was Elvis's turn to speak, he walked slowly to the pulpit. He looked out at the crowded church, people of all colors and backgrounds who had come to honor a woman most of the world had never heard of. I won't take much of your time, Elvis began, his voice rough with emotion. I just want to say that Miss Marianne Fletcher was the best teacher I ever had. Not because she taught me notes and rhythms, though she did that, but because she taught me that music is bigger than any one person. She taught me that kindness matters. She taught me that believing in someone can change their entire life. He paused, collecting himself. When I was 10 years old, I was nobody. I was poor white trash from Mississippi that nobody cared about. But Miss Marianne saw something in me. She took time she didn't have to give, and she shared gifts she didn't have to share. and because of that, my whole life changed. Elvis looked at the simple casket at the front of the church. I just want to say thank you, Miss Marianne. Thank you for everything. And I want to promise you one more time that I'll keep passing the gift forward. Your legacy won't end with me. It will continue through every student who gets a scholarship in your name. Through every young musician who learns your story and understands that music belongs to everyone. He returned to his seat as the organist began playing a soft hymn. People throughout the church joined in singing, their voices blending in harmony. Elvis sang too, his rich voice rising with all the others, just as Miss Marianne had taught him 32 years ago. After the service, Elvis stood in the cemetery as they lowered Miss Marianne's casket into the ground. The hot sun beat down on the mourners gathered around the grave. A dove called somewhere in the distance. As they threw handfuls of earth onto the casket, Elvis whispered one final goodbye. Rest now, Miss Marianne, you earned it. And thank you. Thank you for my whole life. That evening, Elvis returned to his hotel exhausted but strangely at peace. He had done everything he could. He had honored her publicly. He had established the scholarship fund. He had kept every promise. But he couldn't shake a feeling that something else was waiting, something unfinished. He pulled out Miss Marianne's old leather notebook and opened it randomly. His eyes fell on a page he had read hundreds of times before, but tonight the words seemed to glow with new meaning. The greatest gift you can give is to be fully present in each moment, to love completely while you can, because tomorrow is promised to no one. Elvis sat on the edge of his bed, thinking about those words. Tomorrow was promised to no one. He had learned that lesson painfully over the past few days. He thought about his own life, the fame, the fortune, the complications. He thought about his daughter Lisa Marie and how he wanted to be a better father. He thought about the music he still wanted to make, the people he still wanted to help, the changes he still wanted to see in the world. I'm not finished yet, Elvis said aloud to the empty room. Miss Marianne, I'm not finished keeping my promises. He picked up the phone and called his manager. I want to do something different with my next tour. I want to include more gospel music. I want to talk about where the music comes from. I want to tell Miss Marianne's story at every show, and I want part of the ticket proceeds to go to the scholarship fund. His manager sputtered objections about contracts and expectations, but Elvis cut him off. This isn't a request. This is what's happening. Miss Marianne spent her whole life in the shadows. I'm going to make sure everyone knows her name. Over the next weeks, Elvis made good on that promise. He gave interviews about Miss Marianne to newspapers and magazines. He insisted that programs at his concerts include information about the scholarship fund. He talked openly about how a black woman in Mississippi had taught him everything he knew about music. Some people criticized him. Some said he was just trying to make himself look good. Others said he was too late, that he should have spoken up decades earlier. But Elvis didn't care about the critics anymore. He was keeping his promises. That was all that mattered. The scholarship fund grew quickly. Donations poured in from fans who had been moved by Miss Marianne's story. The first scholarships were awarded in early 1978 to 5 talented young musicians, 3 black students, 1 Hispanic student and 1 white student from Appalachia. All 5 came from families who could never have afforded music education otherwise. At the scholarship ceremony, Elvis shook hands with each recipient and gave them copies of Miss Marianne's notebook, which he had carefully reproduced. These are her words, he told them. Her wisdom. Learn from them like I did. And someday, when you're successful, pass the gift forward to someone else. One of the students, a 15-year-old black girl from Louisiana named Carmen, looked at Elvis with tears in her eyes. Why are you doing this for us? Elvis thought about that question. Because 32 years ago someone did it for me. Someone believed in me when nobody else did. Someone gave me a chance. Now it's my turn to give chances to others. How we change the world. One person at a time, one gift at a time, one act of kindness at a time. Life continued. Elvis went back on tour, performing concerts across America. He made plans for future albums. He spent time with his daughter. He struggled with his health problems but kept pushing forward. But every single night before he went to sleep, Elvis would take out Miss Marianne's photograph and her old notebook. He would read a passage and think about the promises he had made. And every single time he stepped onto a stage to sing, Elvis would close his eyes for just a moment and remember a small porch in Mississippi, a patient teacher with a beautiful voice, and a skinny 10-year-old boy learning that music could save his life. "This one's for you, Miss Marianne," he would whisper before the music started. "This one's always for you." The promises had been kept. The circle had been closed. And though Miss Marianne Fletcher was gone from this world, her legacy would continue through the music, through the scholarships, through every person who heard her story and understood that one act of kindness could change everything. Love never dies, music never ends, and promises kept echo through eternity, touching lives in ways we can never fully measure or understand. Miss Marianne had believed in a boy when no one else did, and that boy had grown up to honor her in ways she never imagined. That was the real magic, not fame or fortune, but the simple, profound power of one person seeing another person's worth and helping them become who they were meant to be. The story didn't end with death. It never does. Every student who received a scholarship carried Miss Marianne's gift forward. Every person who heard her story was inspired to look for the overlooked, to believe in the forgotten, to see potential where others saw nothing. And somewhere beyond this world, in a place where there is only music and joy and no more pain, a woman who once sat on a small porch in Mississippi rested peacefully, knowing that her life had mattered, that her love had endured, and that the music, always the music, would continue forever. The sun rose over Memphis, Tennessee, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. It was a beautiful morning, the kind that promised something special. But in a bedroom at Graceland, Elvis Presley did not wake to see it. On August 16, 1977, the same day as the concert where he had reunited with Miss Marianne, Elvis passed away unexpectedly at his home. The news shocked the world. Millions of fans mourned the loss of the king of rock and roll. But there was something strange, something unexplainable about the timing. Reverend James Fletcher stood in his aunt's hospice room in Las Vegas on that same afternoon, confused and shaken. The nurses had told him something impossible. They said Miss Marianne had been unconscious all day on August 16. She had never woken up. She had never left the hospice. "But that's impossible," James insisted. "I was there. I saw her at the concert. I watched the ambulance take her. I sat with her in the back row. She opened her eyes. She spoke to Elvis. She went up on that stage and sang with him." The head nurse shook her head gently. "Reverend Fletcher, your aunt never left this bed. She's been in a coma since the morning of August 15. We have records. We have witnesses. She couldn't have gone anywhere." James looked at the other items in the room. On Miss Marianne's bedside table sat something that shouldn't exist. A backstage pass from Elvis Presley's concert at the International Hotel, dated August 16. The pass was real, official, with Elvis's signature on it. "Then how do you explain this?" James asked, holding up the pass with shaking hands. The nurses had no answer. They just exchanged uncertain glances. And in Memphis, at Graceland, investigators going through Elvis's bedroom found something equally mysterious. On his nightstand lay Miss Marianne's old leather notebook, open to a page that contained fresh handwriting, words written in Miss Marianne's distinctive script. though shakier than before. The message was dated August 6. My dearest Elvis, you kept your promise. Rest now, sweet boy. Your music will echo forever. We'll sing together again someday. With eternal love, Marianne. But according to hospital records, Miss Marianne had been unconscious and unable to write anything on August. The mystery deepened when television stations began receiving calls from viewers who claimed they had watched Elvis's concert on August 16. Thousands of people insisted they had seen him bring an elderly black woman onto the stage, had heard him tell her story, had witnessed them singing together. But when journalists investigated, they found that Elvis had died that afternoon, hours before the concert was scheduled to begin. The concert had been cancelled. It never happened, at least not in the way people normally understand such things. Yet the International Hotel had records of the medical equipment set up in the back row. Security guards remembered helping an elderly woman in a wheelchair. Band members recalled Elvis stopping mid-song and calling someone to the stage. The sound engineer had recordings of an old gospel hymn being sung by two voices, one strong and one weak, blending together perfectly. It was as if the concert had happened and not happened at the same time. As if two souls had been granted one final gift, a moment outside of normal time and space, a chance to say goodbye and keep promises that death itself couldn't break. Reverend Fletcher struggled to understand what had occurred. Had it been a shared dream, a vision, a miracle, or something beyond human understanding? He found his answer in a letter that arrived a week after both Elvis and Miss Marianne had passed away. It was from Patricia, the nurse, who had cared for Miss Marianne at the hospice. Dear Reverend Fletcher, I don't fully understand what happened on August 16, but I know what I experienced. I was with Miss Marianne all day. She never physically left her bed, but around 8 o'clock that evening, something changed. Her vital signs suddenly improved. Her breathing became stronger, and though her eyes stayed closed, she began humming softly. I've been a nurse for 10 years, and I've never seen anything like it. It was as if her spirit left her body and went somewhere else, somewhere beautiful, while her physical form remained here. She hummed for about 2 hours, the same gospel melodies over and over. And she was smiling. Such a peaceful smile. Then around 10 o'clock she whispered one word, Elvis. Shortly after that she passed away. No struggle, no pain. She simply stopped breathing, still smiling. I don't know if what people saw at that concert was real in the way we usually define reality, but I know that Miss Marianne got exactly what she needed. Somehow, in some way, she heard Elvis sing. She sang with him. She told him she was proud. And then she was ready to go. Maybe love is stronger than the laws of physics. Maybe promises can bend time and space. Maybe grace finds a way when we need it most. I just thought you should know that your aunt died happy knowing she mattered. With sympathy and wonder, Patricia. James read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down his face. Then he understood. The concert had happened, not in the physical world where bodies and time rules everything, but in some other realm where spirits could meet, where love transcended death, where promises kept their power even beyond the grave. Both Elvis and Miss Marianne had been dying on August 16. Both had been holding on for one final moment together. And somehow, through means beyond human understanding, they had been granted that moment. They had met in a space between life and death, had sung together one last time, had closed the circle that began 32 years earlier on a porch in Mississippi. Then their promises kept and their goodbyes said, both had been released to rest. The world mourned Elvis Presley. Millions attended memorials. Radio stations played his music non-stop. Presidents and celebrities praised his contributions to American culture. He was buried at Graceland with full honors, and his grave became a shrine that fans would visit for generations. Miss Marianne Fletcher was buried quietly in a small cemetery in Las Vegas, with only family and close friends attending. The world barely noticed her passing. No headlines announced her death. No president sent condolences. But Elvis had made sure her name wouldn't be forgotten. The Marianne Fletcher Music Scholarship Fund continued to grow. By 1980, it had helped 50 students pursue their musical dreams. By 1990, over 200. By 2000, over 500. Each student who received a scholarship learned Miss Marianne's story. They learned about the woman who had taught Elvis Presley when he was just a poor boy from Mississippi. They learned about the courage it took to cross racial boundaries. They learned about the power of believing in someone when the world had given up on them. And many of those students went on to become successful musicians, teachers, and artists themselves. They passed the gift forward, just as Miss Marianne had asked. They found other young people with talent but no opportunities, and they helped them. Carmen, one of the first scholarship recipients, became an acclaimed jazz vocalist. She established her own scholarship program in Louisiana, specifically for young black women from poor families. Miss Marianne believed in Elvis, Carmen would say. Elvis believed in me. Now I'm believing in the next generation. That's how we change the world. Marcus, another early recipient, became a music teacher in inner-city Detroit. He taught hundreds of students over his career, always telling them Miss Marianne's story. You don't need to be rich to have value, he would say. You don't need to be famous to matter. One person believing in you can change everything. By 2025, nearly 50 years after that mysterious concert, the Marianne Fletcher Music Scholarship Fund had helped over 1,500 students. Many had become professional musicians, teachers, composers, and producers. They worked in every genre of music: gospel, jazz, country, rock, hip-hop, classical. They were black, white, Hispanic, Asian, Native American. They came from every corner of America. And all of them carried Miss Marianne's lesson in their hearts. Music belongs to everyone. Music builds bridges. Music heals wounds that nothing else can touch. Biographies of Elvis Presley now included chapters about Miss Marianne Fletcher. Music historians studied her influence on his style. Graduate students wrote dissertations about the cross-racial musical exchange that happened in 1945 Mississippi and how it shaped the future of American music. Miss Marianne's name appeared in textbooks. Documentaries featured her story. Young musicians learned about the woman who had taught the king of rock and roll everything he knew. She was no longer forgotten. She was no longer invisible. Her legacy lived on through music, through scholarships, through every person who heard her story and understood that kindness matters, that believing in someone can save their life, that love is stronger than death. On August 16, 2027, the 50th anniversary of that mysterious concert, a special ceremony was held at the International Hotel in Las Vegas, now renamed but still standing. Over 500 scholarship recipients gathered, along with thousands of music fans and historians. They honored both Elvis Presley and Marianne Fletcher. They sang gospel hymns together, their voices blending in harmony, just as Elvis and Miss Marianne's voices had blended 50 years earlier. Young and old, black and white, rich and poor, all singing together, united by music that transcended every boundary people tried to create. An elderly woman stood at the front of the crowd, leaning on her grandson's arm for support. Her name was Patricia, the nurse who had cared for Miss Marianne in her final days. She was 92 years old now, but her voice was still strong and beautiful. Patricia had used the scholarship Elvis gave her to become a professional gospel singer. She had performed all over the world, always telling audiences about Miss Marianne and Elvis, always explaining that her entire career existed because of their kindness. Now at this anniversary ceremony, Patricia was asked to sing. She stood at the microphone, closed her eyes and began the same hymn that Elvis and Miss Marianne had sung together 50 years ago. Her voice filled the space, rich and pure and full of emotion. And as she sang, people throughout the audience closed their eyes and felt something mysterious, something beautiful, as if two spirits were present, listening and smiling, pleased that their legacy continued. When the song ended, Patricia opened her eyes and spoke to the crowd. "I never met Elvis Presley," she said. "Well, I met him once briefly, but I never got to really know him, and I only knew Miss Marianne for a few weeks at the end of her life. But they changed my life completely. They taught me that one act of kindness can echo through generations." She paused, looking out at the hundreds of scholarship recipients in the audience. "You are all proof of that echo. Your music, your teaching, your kindness to others, that's Miss Marianne's gift, still spreading through the world. That's Elvis's promise, still being kept. And that's the real miracle, not what happened on August 16, 1977, but what's still happening today because of what they started." The crowd erupted in applause. People stood, cheered, cried. They were witnessing the living legacy of two people who had refused to let death end their story. That night, after the ceremony ended and the crowds dispersed, Patricia stood alone in the empty concert hall. She looked at the stage where something impossible had happened 50 years ago, where two souls had somehow met one final time to keep promises that transcended death itself. "Thank you," Patricia whispered to the empty room. "Thank you, Miss Marianne, for believing in people. Thank you, Elvis, for honoring her. And thank you both for teaching us that love and music can survive anything, even death, even time, even the barriers that try to keep us apart." A soft breeze moved through the hall, though all the doors were closed. It rustled papers and made the curtains sway gently. For just a moment, Patricia could have sworn she heard two voices humming in harmony, one strong and one soft, blending together perfectly. She smiled. Maybe it was just her imagination, maybe it was the wind, or maybe, just maybe, it was two souls still making music together somewhere beyond this world, still keeping their promises, still proving that love never dies and music never ends. Patricia walked out into the warm Nevada night, her heart full of gratitude and wonder. Above her, stars glittered in the dark sky, ancient light from distant places finally reaching Earth. Just like Miss Marianne's kindness to a 10-year-old boy in 1945 was still reaching people in 2027, light from the past illuminating the present, promises kept echoing through time, love proving itself stronger than death itself. The music continues, the promises endure, and somewhere, two voices sing together forever, teaching us that the greatest gift we can give is to believe in someone when the world has looked away, to see worth where others see nothing, to plant seeds of kindness that will grow into forests long after we're gone. This is the legacy of Marianne Fletcher and Elvis Presley. Not fame or fortune, but the simple, profound truth that one person believing in another can change the world. The end is really just another beginning. The music never stops. The love never dies. And the promises, oh, the promises, they echo through eternity, touching hearts we'll never meet, changing lives we'll never see, proving that nothing we do in love is ever wasted. Rest peacefully, Miss Marianne. Rest peacefully, Elvis. Your work continues through every scholarship granted, every song sung, every act of kindness inspired by your story. The music will carry on, forever and always. The music will carry on. Miss Marianne and Elvis taught us that one act of kindness can change the world forever. Their story proves that believing in someone, really believing in them, can create ripples that last for generations. Now we want to hear from you. Where are you listening from? Drop your country or city in the comments below. And if this story touched your heart, Please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Help us spread more stories of kindness and hope to people who need them. Your support means everything. Every like, every share, every subscription helps these important stories reach more hearts around the world. And don't go anywhere yet. Click on the video appearing on your screen right now for another incredible true story that will inspire you. Thank you for listening, and remember, you never know how one small act of kindness today might change someone's entire life tomorrow.